Alright, welcome to Battlebots Season 5, Episode 1. These are my predictions for the upcoming episode. I'll go into a little bit about the history of the robots, and then go into more detail about the fights themselves. So, sit back and enjoy. So, Whiplash versus Sawblaze. Now, what a way this is going to be to start off Battlebots 2020. These are two robots that have made it to the top 16 twice in a row and have never fought one another before. It's going to be fantastic. We have two excellent drivers, two of the best in the competition, Matt Vasquez and Jamison Go. And a lot of this fight, I think, is going to come down to control, right? Who can control whom? Because both of the robots, they have fairly similar ways of winning the fight. Sawblaze is a little bit more bullying, a little bit more, they body robots into the wall. They run with enough power that they can actually do damage just by slamming their opponents against the hazards. Whiplash, on the other hand, a little bit more controlled. That lifter affords them some flexibility when it comes to how they actually win the fight. It's a little more precise, and this means they perhaps rely on that precision driving a little bit more than Sawblaze does. We've seen Sawblaze dominate fights against smaller robots in the past, and while Whiplash, it sort of acts like a smaller robot, it acts like a scrapper a lot of the time. It fills that sort of a role. It almost reminds me a little bit of King Buxton, back from classic Robot Wars. But the robot is deceptively large. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to affect how Sawblaze handles Whiplash. We'll just have to see. But if the fight against Ribot last season is anything to go by, then it should probably handle a larger robot just as well as it handled smaller robots such as Reality and Rotator, that it was able to just slam around the arena, bang into the walls, cause all sorts of havoc.
There are some bots that are able to use the box to its advantage. I would say Jamison Go and Sawblaze did it perfectly.
Jamison, I believe, will probably opt for the smaller Sawblade weapon rather than the larger flywheel chunking sort of a weapon that they went with against Blacksmith and against Son of Waiachi. The reason being that when Sawblaze runs with the larger weapon, it rears up, the forks lift off the ground, and it gives away a lot of ground clearance that it definitely can't afford to against Whiplash.
He just can't keep his forks on the ground long enough to win the battle for low ground.
So yeah, that's why I think we'll see the thinner saw in action for Sawblaze. I think Jamison will see it as prudent to sacrifice that damage potential to be able to control the fight more effectively. At the end of the day, it's very difficult to judge exactly how a head-to-head wedge battle will pan out. Which robots' forks or wedges are going to be lower than the others. But I feel like Whiplash's forks just won't quite have the reach to get underneath the forks on the front of Sawblaze. I also don't think that Jamison will let Matt Vasquez get round to the sides, get round to the wheels and the back, and start taking control with the lifter and doing damage with the spinner, just because Sawblaze is a very controllable robot. Jamison's a very good driver. It's very easy to spin round. It's got a very, very quick turning circle. So I reckon Jamison will keep his front towards Whiplash. That'll be effective in stopping Whiplash from getting underneath. And I reckon he'll be able to bully Whiplash around the arena like he's been able to do to so many other robots. And despite Matt Vasquez being an excellent driver, I just think the matchup, especially when they're running at each other head to head, it's just not quite in favor of Whiplash in terms of the way the two robots are built. In terms of the actual weapons, I honestly don't think the weapons themselves will come into play. I think, or as much at least, they won't be as much of a factor. I think this is going to be a purely driving battle. But yeah, so for those reasons, I'm going to say judge's decision, and it'll go to Sawblaze. Okay, let's talk about our second fight of the night, and this is going to be between Madcata and Fusion. So Madcata was built by Martin Mason, and he's had a very interesting history in Battlebots. He started off in Season 2 with Bad Kitty. They only managed to get one fight in that season, and he showed up on the Warhawk team in Battlebots 2018 and 2019. Now, you may have noticed that Warhawk is essentially the same robot that Martin Mason has taken to Robo Games under the name of Cataclysm, and the Chinese competition King of Bots under the name Cat King. Madcata last season was a very similar robot to Warhawk in that it had the same construction, only a different set of weapons, the axe and the flipper. Madcata returns this season with that same setup. However, it now incorporates a vertical spinner, very similar to that of Warhawk from last season. And I feel like we can treat this almost as an extension of Warhawk rather than an extension of Madcata. Basically like a merger between the two almost, an extension of the construction of the one and the theme of the other, which I think is pretty cool. Now let me introduce you to Rhys Ewart. And as you can tell from the name, part of the prolific Ewart dynasty of bot building Wisconsians. He was involved with Warrior Clan and Son of Waiachi in the first 3 seasons. He was the person behind Falcon last season, and now he has brought Fusion. This is an entirely new robot. It sports a vertical double disc spinner at the front and a tri-bar horizontal spinner at the back. So similar to Falcon in the philosophy behind the design in terms of having one weapon at the front, one weapon at the back.
Big hit from one of Falcon's drums, and he's got 2 of them, Kenny.
So regarding the actual fight, I suspect Madcata will come in sporting its vertical spinner configuration rather than the axe, since that will probably be better at deflecting the tri-bar spinner at the back of Fusion. However, I don't think Fusion will lead with the tri-bar spinner. I reckon it'll go with the vertical spinner at the front, make it all about the ground battle between the fronts of both of the robots. Now, this is all guesswork. I mean, obviously, that's all that this whole video is. But it is very difficult to predict what's going to happen between two, fairly untested robots. As I said, we can probably treat Madcata a little bit like Warhawk, sort of envision it like that. And I guess we have to remember exactly what happened to Warhawk the last time it fought a new robot from the Ewart clan. It didn't end up going particularly well. So that being said, we know that the Ewart clan know how to build a robot that can work just right off the bat and not really have any kinks and be a hit in its first season. And that's possibly what Fusion will be. However, for this battle in particular, I think the extra power and reach that the weapon on the front of Madcata will have afforded to them by the fact that they don't have this large extra weapon at the back that Fusion does, that might tip the balance in favor of Madcata in this fight. I reckon that weapon will overpower either of the weapons that Fusion can throw at it, and I reckon we'll see a first win to Martin Mason of Madcata this season by knockout. Alright, next 2 cabs off the rank, Axe Backwards and Malice. Let's have a quick look at Axe Backwards. Kurt Durgeon has fought with this robot since Season 3 of Battlebots. It's undergone a couple of evolutions since then. I love this robot. It's reminiscent of Barbarous, obviously the only other full-body drum spinner that we've ever seen back in classic Robot Wars. It's a fantastic design, but we haven't quite seen it hit its stride yet. The weapon has worked only sporadically throughout its history, and I think we're all really hoping that Kurt can have that sorted for this season and do some real damage. It could potentially be a top 32 bot this season if that weapon can work reliably. Let's quickly look at Malice.
And Killalot plucks Malice into the air. Malice in real trouble, so too.
Yeah, that Malice. Adrienne Soriol, or Bunny, has been part of a couple of teams throughout BattleBots history. She was part of Rex in 2015, and last season she competed alongside Adam Wrigley in the team of Shatter. Now she's heading up her own team, and she's built a very interesting robot, a horizontal drum. I think I've only ever seen one robot with a horizontal drum in the past, a robot called Cavalier, which competed in Robo games. It actually had 2 horizontal drums on the front. But Malice will be the first one to step up to the stage of televised robot combat. The rest of Malice looks like it's of robust construction, however, unlike horizontal spinners such as Tombstone, it doesn't quite have the same wide area of attack, given that that drum has a more narrow surface area that will actually do damage. Hard to predict this fight, obviously, since we've got one completely untested robot on one side and another which we've yet to see its full potential. The question, I think, comes down to whether or not that weapon of Axe Backwards is going to work, that drum spinner. If it does, it makes Axe Backwards a very difficult robot to attack, but even then, with the weapon working, we have seen it struggle. The wheels are an obvious target, and they're very easy to hit, and I think Malice will probably be able to get at least a couple of hits in on those wheels. Weapon to weapon is going to be very unpredictable, but if I had to guess, I'd say the heavier weapon on Axe Backwards will probably win out, and I think that's where my tip will land. I'm going to say Axe Backwards, the robot that has had more time to work out its gremlins over the past 3 years, will possibly beat the newcomer. I'm not so certain about this one, however. I'm going to tentatively say Axe Backwards by a judge's decision. I'm not sure if either weapon is going to last the full 3 minutes. The fourth fight of the night is shaping up to be a fast, aggressive, action-packed battle. We have Scorpios against Bloodsport. Scorpios has been competing since Season 2. They only got one battle there. They really started to show off what they can do in Season 3, especially in that battle against Icewave, which we'll come back to. Season 4 saw Zachary Lytle take over from Orion Beach, the original captain, and he led the team very close to coming within the top 16, just missing out, losing to Lockjaw in a play-in fight. Justin Marples of Bloodsport, on the other hand, was a rookie last season, bringing Bloodsport a round robot with an overhead spinning bar, a weapon that managed to cause a lot of damage on its way to a play-in rumble, which it ultimately also lost. So both of these robots are coming in with a similar track record for Season 4, however Scorpios and Zach Lytle have much more experience. Scorpios remains unchanged from last season, whereas Bloodsport looks like an entirely new robot. They've ditched the round shape of the original machine for a low square profile with wedges at the front, and they also have options between the tri-bar spinning weapon that you can see here and a 70-pound thicker weapon seen here. When it comes to the actual fight, I think it all comes down to Bloodsport's weapon. Whether or not it has the torque to spin back up when it's being pressured by Scorpios, and whether it can get up to speed fast enough to actually do significant damage and stop Scorpios' charge in its tracks. We know that Scorpios is going to be driven aggressively. We know it's going to box rush Bloodsport from across the arena to attempt to stop that weapon from spinning up at all. And the obvious example of this is Scorpios' fight against Icewave back in Season 3.
I just can't get away from him, he's too fast.
Where it showed it could do this and win the judge's decision. Controversially, however, I think pretty convincingly. Bloodsport, on the other hand, is going to need to be fast to actually get away from Scorpios to spin that weapon up. It's a classic Scorpios type fight where they need to absolutely stay on their opponent, harass them, and just keep that weapon from spinning up. Pretty simple, I think. And honestly, I think Zach Lytle will be able to pull it off for the full 3 minutes. Whether or not he can do damage with the weapon on Scorpios, whether or not that's a priority even, is another question. I imagine they'll try to. But I think this could end up looking a lot like Sawblaze versus Son of Waiachi last season. And I'm going to give Scorpios the victory on a judge's decision, much like in their fight against Icewave from a couple of years ago. Well, if I went into the histories of these two teams, they would be their own separate videos because they have oodles of experience behind them. That's right, I'm talking about Brian Nave with Captain Shrederator and Donald Hudson with Lockjaw for for this 5th fight of episode 1. From the early 2000s, Brian Nave has remained completely loyal to the full body spinner design, with robots such as Frisbee and Revolutionist back from the Comedy Central days of Battlebots and Robot Wars Extreme Warriors. On the other hand, you have Donald Hudson, who hasn't really remained loyal to a design until these recent Battlebot seasons. You had Tazbot, you had Dissector, you had the original Lockjaw known as Root Canal, an entire plethora of different designs that Donald has come up with. These days he settled for Lockjaw being a vertical spinner with the classic cambered wheels and the lifting forks on the front. And it's worked well for him recently, making it to the top 8 last season and the top 4 the season before that. Captain Shrederator, on the other hand, has had much less success. They've been plagued by reliability issues. The team's attention has been divided between Battlebots and King of Bots over in China. And, I can hardly blame them for that. Who doesn't want to fight in as many robot competitions as you possibly can? That's completely understandable. But it has come at the cost of success in Battlebots. Every time Captain Shrederator takes to the box, you can see the potential. You can see the power that it spins up with. You can see the damage that it can do. But it always just seems to fall short, even against robots that you would think are perhaps of lesser quality. But in this year of coronavirus, there have been fewer distractions. People have had more opportunity to work on their robots, situation depending. And, maybe Captain Shrederator is going to be a lot more reliable this season. But we shall see. For this fight in particular, we know that Donald Hudson loves to take on horizontal spinners with that shield at the back that curves upwards, throwing the horizontal spinners into the air whenever it can, and then turning around and countering with the vertical spinner on the front. That shield is incredibly tough. It's well designed. It's the perfect shape to take on horizontal spinners. Of course, it lost to Tombstone last season, but there's no shame in that. In terms of other horizontal spinners that Lockjaw has fought, it has beaten Son of Waiachi, it has beaten Valkyrie, 2 very powerful horizontal spinners. I think Captain Shrederator probably sits in the middle of those 2 robots in terms of raw power. So I reckon Donald Hudson will be able to handle it. I'm going to give this, I'm going to have to say it's probably going to be a knockout. We've seen full body spinners get flipped over pretty easily by vertical spinners in the past, and pretty frequently as well. So I reckon Captain Shrederator will probably end up on its back, and it's going to be a win to Mutant Robotics, Donald Hudson, and Lockjaw by knockout. Now, we all know how dangerous sporks are, right?
Oh, cool, a spork! Don't hurt me!
So it's puzzling that we've only ever seen one Battlebot use a spork as a weapon. And here it is, Sporkinok. This robot has evolved from an antweight to a middleweight, and now to a heavyweight. The heavyweight had its fighting debut last year at Orlando Maker Fair, where it fought against Axe Backwards and had a few difficulties. But Lilith Specht has had the whole year now to build a completely new heavyweight robot, which looks of much higher quality than Sporkinok from last year. The weapon system looks a lot more sophisticated, and I absolutely love the look of this robot in general. I have to liken it to Lycan from Season 2. It looks like it's going to be this big sort of burly robot, lots of power, heavy hitting when it just drives into you. The double wheels at the back definitely remind me of Lycan, and I think that's a really good thing. I've been waiting a Lycan-like robot to come back for quite a while now. The Battlebots website says the type is just spork, but I feel like it might be a clamper based on the way the lifter and the spork are set up. And here we have Sporkinok's opponent, Dave Eaton and Rusty. Yes, the rust is real. This is a tracked robot with a drill weapon that, let's be honest, it looks fantastic. This is obviously a robot that belongs back in the Comedy Central days, and I'm so glad we are seeing it here in Battlebots. This is something that I love about Discovery Battlebots, is that since we have this fight card situation, we can have more sort of theme-based robots that aren't all about winning the giant nut, right? And Rusty epitomizes that. It really does. I'm so looking forward to just seeing, I don't know, seeing it get smashed apart, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect from this, I'll be honest. But yeah, it's a themed robot. It's great, and it's great for the sport as well. It provides, a brilliant show, and maybe it can win a battle or two. In this case, I think I'm gonna have to give the points to Sporkanok. I don't know how Rusty will perform, how fast it's gonna be, how damaging the weapon's gonna be, whether it can even just hold its ground against another heavyweight smashing into it. And I'm expecting Sporkanok to have a lot of speed, a lot of power, to just rush across the arena and do damage upon impact, especially to a robot that looks like this. No offense to our man David Eaton here, who's built this on his own, by the way, and I think that's amazing. I honestly, anyone who does something like this on their own, it's fantastic, and actually bring it to Battlebots and put on a show for us. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, Sporkanok for mine. I'm gonna have to say by knockout, to be honest. So Sharko this season looks like an absolute menace. Edward Robinson is back with his shark-themed robot. It used to be called Shark Oprion. That was back in Season 3. Now he's back. It's simply just called Sharko. They've dropped the vertical spinning disc. They now have sort of like a flipper/clamp situation going on at the front. Massive wheels, some armor plating. It looks wild. It looks fantastic, and it's no less than what we could have expected from Edward Robinson, who incidentally has been competing for a long time. Remember Snookums in Robot Wars Extreme Warriors? That was Edward Robinson's doing. He was in Robotica, he was in classic Battlebots back in the Comedy Central days, and now back once again in the Battle Box. He's going up against a robot called vsmee. The history of this robot is kind of reminiscent to Huge, since it's a unique design. It is upscaled from a much smaller weight class down in the 3-pound category, where it was essentially 2 robots attached to one giant wedge, making it very, very difficult for opponents to fight it. What's different in the heavyweight version of vsmee is that it is now essentially, the wedge is now essentially a large entangling device designed to snag robots and essentially surround and entrap them. The entrapped robot will then be chewed away at by 2 undercutting blades attached to each of the modules on the side. But yeah, the entrance of this robot has been much anticipated, and I cannot wait for Joseph Fabiani to show off exactly what he's got going here. Now, in terms of the actual fight, I have no idea how this is going to go. We've never seen a robot like vsmee, and I think judging this fight comes down to essentially how well does vsmee work, right? Because Sharko has a more conventional design, so for me, the burden of proof, I guess if you want to call it that, lies on vsmee. I think like most untested designs, we might see a couple of hiccups here and there for vsmee. So honestly, I reckon I'll give it to Sharko, and I'll give it on a judge's decision. I don't think Sharko will knock out vsmee, but I think it will perform better. This is a really tricky one. I think the tires can withstand any damage that those 2 undercutters can do. I mean, maybe Sharko's wheels can roll over the top of vsmee's wedge, perhaps. I don't know. It's making my head hurt to think about this matchup, so I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stick with the decision. Sharko, judge's decision. Alright, get ready guys, this is it. The main event. Tombstone versus Endgame. Now this matchup goes all the way back to Season 3 after Endgame's first fight against Captain Shrederator. Jack Barker called out Ray Billings, says he could take on Tombstone.
Who else do you want to take down?
We'd take Tombstone.
Yeah, you think so, huh?
Filled with confidence after that first victory. Since then, Endgame has been a little underwhelming. It has had some reliability issues. Jack Barker has been frustrated, visibly so. with the performance of Endgame, especially last season. But we cannot forget just how powerful that weapon is, and how powerful it has always been, going all the way back to the FMB Championships, where the New Zealanders entered Death Toll. Since then, they've entered Battlebots and come close to making it to the top 16, but not quite, losing in a play-in rumble in Season 3 and going 2-3 in Season 4, including the Desperado tournament. Jack Barker has relinquished captaincy for this season. Nick Maybe takes over, and along with that, Endgame has added a chunky new wedge, thick with as many C's as SME has E's. And along with that, they have a much more streamlined self-righting mechanism than the sunglasses from last season. And of course, taking on the Kiwis, Ray Billings and Hardcore Robotics. And what can we say about them that has not already been said so many times before? Last Rites is a legend, Tombstone even more so now. Ray is the most feared robot builder in the entire sport, and for good reason as well. It was 3 seasons ago now that Ray won the Giant Nut in Season 2, defeating Bombshell in the final. Since then, he placed in the top 16 in Season 3, and last season he made it all the way into the top 4 after being beaten by Bite Force. This robot really only gets beaten by the best, as you'd expect. As for the matchup itself, we know Tombstone struggles a little bit against powerful vertical spinners. We've seen that against Witch Doctor a couple of times, and we have seen that against Bite Force, of course. We also know that Tombstone struggles against thick wedges. Now, here's Endgame with a combination of the two. The question is, how reliable is Endgame going to be, along with how controllable is it going to be? We've seen Endgame have drive issues in the past, and if any of that happens against Ray Billings, he's going to get around the back and he's going to do serious damage to parts that Endgame does not want to be touched by that spinning bar. However, if Endgame is able to keep itself straight head-on with Tombstone, I don't think Tombstone's going to get a look in. I think Tombstone is going to be sent flying across the arena. We know how vulnerable Tombstone gets when it is bouncing around the arena completely out of control. Endgame can really come in and do some serious damage to the weaker parts of Tombstone. And honestly, I think that's what's going to happen. I reckon Endgame is going to be more reliable this season, and it will drive a whole lot more smoothly, and that means they'll, for this fight in particular, be able to keep their front pointed at Tombstone and make sure that Tombstone is sent flying across the arena and is left vulnerable. So I'm going to give this fight to Endgame via knockout. And those are all my predictions for this episode, this first episode of Season 5 of Battlebots. I can't believe it. We've now made it to the same amount of seasons as that they had in the Comedy Central days, and I think that's wonderful. I think that shows just how healthy robot combat is these days. It's going to be interesting. We're going to have a new champion, finally. No Bite Force this season. It's not as if I wanted to see the back of Paul Ventimiglia or anything like that. I love the idea of having this Goliath that everyone is trying to take down. Who's going to be the one to finally do it? Still, we've got to take the good with the bad, and a new champion this season is a very, very interesting prospect. So yeah, those are my tips. Sawblaze by judge's decision, Madcata by knockout, Axe Backwards by judge's decision, Scorpios by judge's decision, Lockjaw by knockout, Sporkanok by knockout, Sharko by judge's decision, and Endgame by knockout. And I'll see you next week to preview the next episode of Battlebots. I don't know, hit the like button if you want to, push some buttons, type some words. I don't really mind. And have a good day.